Hello everybody, Jared Voley here for CreativeStandUp.com. In this video, we are going to be talking about broken assumptions. Now, a broken assumption is probably the most common type of joke structure out there. And the reason for that is because it's extremely easy to use, as you're going to be seeing in this video. And also, if you use it correctly, it can get some pretty decent laughs. That said, there are two really big weaknesses with a broken assumption style joke. The first one is that it can be really easy for the audience to figure out what you're doing, especially if you say a couple of different broken assumption jokes in a row. You can't simply follow one broken assumption with another of the same style joke and think that the audience isn't going to be able to jump ahead of you. And also, it doesn't work to change the specific assumption that you're breaking either, because the audience can definitely jump ahead. And the second problem with a broken assumption, and this is probably my main issue with it, is that I believe it damages the audience's trust if you don't use it super rarely. And the reason is because a broken assumption requires that something that the audience assumes in the setup is going to be false in the punchline. So the comedian knows that the audience is going to be making the wrong assumption, and then they use that to basically create the humor in the punchline. And this essentially is teaching the audience that they can't really trust anything that is happening in the setup. So if you do it several times in a row, the audience member is going to say, you've played this trick before. Now that you're saying a new setup, the audience is going to say, wait, can I really trust the assumptions that I'm making for this setup as well? So maybe you're not even doing a broken assumption joke, but the audience is going to be thinking, well, can I really trust you right now or not? And this is one of the reasons why I love using comedic conflict instead of conventional joke writing. Comedic conflict, it does not require that the setup has any false information. And in fact, using comedic conflict, it oftentimes we're using the audience's correct assumptions as a way of creating the humor. Anyway, that's an entirely different video, so we'll talk about that somewhere else. I'll just say personally, when I'm using I will use a broken assumption periodically, but I never do. I'm never going to write into it. It's never going to be the basis of any of my material. If there is a good opportunity to use it, then I will definitely take it. But otherwise, there's just so many better ways of creating humor more naturally, and a lot of ways of getting a much better quality of laughter. So that's my opinion about broken assumptions. Let's move on into what broken assumptions actually are and how to use them. So every time you are speaking to somebody, whether an audience or not, there's the information that you're giving them can go into the category, can go into who, what, where, when, why, or how. So you're basically saying one of these 6 pieces of information. You're giving them, giving the listener that information. So some of that information is going to be explicit. So you're going to say you're going to say it out loud. Some of it is going to be implicit, which means that the audience or the listener is going to assume, they're going to fill in the blanks basically. So if I say something like, I went to the grocery store, then there's going to be explicit information, who, because it's I am the one doing it, and where, because I specifically said grocery store. What you do not know is the what, when, why, or the how. So we can say we know these 2 pieces of information, who and where. However, the audience is also going to make some assumptions. If I say I went to the grocery store, then you can probably figure out why I would go to the grocery store. So you say, okay, well, he needed to buy food. And you can also figure out how I went to the grocery store. You could probably fill that in and just say, well, he probably drove his car there. So this is how broken assumptions are created. Anytime we say any of this green information, the explicit, the audience is going to fill in the blanks in order to get a more full picture of everything. So what we're going to do is anytime the audience assumes something, there's the opportunity of breaking that assumption. So Steve Martin, I gave my cat a bath the other day. They love it. He sat there, he enjoyed it, and it was fun for me too. So this is his setup, and here's what we explicitly know as an audience. We know who, because Steve Martin is saying, I did it. We know what he's doing, and we know when it was, because he says it was the other day, even though the when is usually not important to these broken assumption jokes. So this is what we explicitly know, and we also know we can safely assume all of this. We can safely assume that he was in the bathroom washing the cat. We can assume that the cat was dirty and that's why he was doing it. And we can also say, we can assume how, because everyone would wash their cat probably in the bathtub. So we come over to the punchline, and he says his punchline, the fur would stick to my tongue, but other than that. So in the punchline, we can see that he has the first assumption is, the assumption that he's breaking is a how. And I call these types of jokes how shifts, just because it's shifting the how from the setup to the punchline. So in the setup, the how is he put his cat in the bath. And then in the punchline, the how is that he licked his cat. So let's take another example. This one's Bill Engvall. He's talking about golfing. So I finally, on about the 15th tee, I hit the drive of my life. And I watched this ball go and kind of hit this guy in the head. And I felt bad, but he overreacted, I think. I mean, it wasn't a square hit. It just kind of glanced off his head. But he goes whipping his car off the freeway like, here we go, Mr. Attitude. So this shift, you can see, originally we assume that when he hits somebody, we're assuming that he's hitting somebody that is also on the golf course. So either another golfer or somebody that is standing near the golf course. And then he shifts at the punchline, the person becomes someone that's driving on the highway or the freeway, whatever. So this is a who shift. And also you can tell that, so it's a who shift, but also you could say it's like a where shift, because the where of the person shifts as well. The what shifts. So how you classify it doesn't really matter. I just say it's a who shift is just an easier way of saying it. Anyway, we can look over here and we can break down the information that Engvall gave us. So we know about Bill. We know he was playing, who was playing golf. We know what he was playing, and we know that from earlier we know that he was playing golf very poorly. So we know how he was playing golf as well. What we don't know is where. We can assume that he was at a golf club. And we don't know why he was playing golf, but we can assume that he was playing golf to have fun. And when, we don't really care about when at all. The guy that got hit in the head, we don't know any information about him other than that he got hit in the head. So we don't know who, we don't know what, or where. But in the punchline, we learn that this guy isn't actually who we thought he was. He isn't the person, he isn't where we thought he was, and he isn't doing what we thought he was doing. So he becomes a driver. Anyway, so this is a couple examples of different types of shifts. Real quick, I'll say when is often undefined simply because it's not going to be important to the joke. So more often than not, you can leave it out and it doesn't really change anything. So there you go. That is a quick rundown of how broken assumptions work. Remember, so there's both explicit and implicit information that you're giving the listener. You're always telling the audience the who, what, where, when, why, or the how of a story. And so the audience is going to be making assumptions based on the explicit information that you give them. And in the punchline, you're going to break one of those assumptions. So that is how a broken assumption joke works.